But it turns out, are we recording?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, so everyone asked me
Told me.
So I was in Leeds with my son and shopping, and we just went in the shop, and I was like, "Oh, that's a cool hat." And he's like, "Yeah, you should get it. It's a cool brand." I was like, "Okay." And so I got it in 2 colors, and everyone was asking me what it means. I was like, "I don't know."
Move it.
And so I didn't really pay attention to it because I didn't know. And then I was doing an interview with Majid, and I think it's Persian for means a free
Persian
man.
name. Huh.
Yeah. So it turns out it's a very Bitcoin hat.
It's almost the right color as well.
Almost. So, but it got really dirty. And then my red one also got dirty, and my son stole the black one.
So you bought 3.
So I had to go back and buy 5. I bought 5 more.
Oh, okay.
Pete does this with everything. He buys just the same thing over and over
Yeah, I buy
again.
identical things, and then it looks like I don't do laundry, or I'm very dirty.
Yeah. It's anyway, good to see you again.
Yeah.
Last time I saw you, we were with the lions and the elephants.
Yeah.
We were out in the jungle. That was cool.
Not in the jungle.
Well, kind of. Jungle for us.
Oh.
If you're from Bedford.
Everything's a jungle.
Everything's a
from
jungle.
Bedford.
That was a good trip.
Yeah, wow.
Welcome back to What Bitcoin Did.
Thank you.
Last time you had a little cameo appearance for 15 minutes at the end of the show. That was a long time. What, 4 years ago?
Yeah, 2019. 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So we should revisit that because you were at Chaincode as one of the interns.
Yeah, I was at Chaincode. Now I am at Chaincode. So kind of coming full circle.
Yeah. I think there'll be a lot of people listening to the show who have no idea about Chaincode, what they do, and how important it is for Bitcoin. And I think it is important. I think we should pimp them out a bit here. So, and then we should talk a little bit more about recruiting developers, and then about women in Bitcoin.
Sure, let's go. Well, I think pimping it out is kind of exactly what Chaincode isn't about.
I know.
Chaincode exists to support Bitcoin. We've got a team of about 10 people, 12 people in New York, and we all work on various things, but it's kind of a magical place because you go there and they say, work on something that is interesting to you and that is good for Bitcoin, and they don't tell you what to do. They help you do it, and you get to work with some of the smartest and coolest people in Bitcoin. So yeah, it's a place where we get good work done and we get to do a lot of education stuff, which I find very rewarding. Having come from that track, it's very nice to be on the other end of it and help people find this like magical career in Bitcoin open source, which is not really something that people know exists or think is an opportunity in engineering generally.
It's the intern program you were part of, though, right?
Well, we called it the residency,
Yeah.
but it was a 3-month internship where we did upfront a bunch of theory and then followed that up with a few months to work on open source projects and kind of get into this beast that is Bitcoin open source, because it takes a lot of time to go from zero to being able to actually contribute properly.
What were you doing before that?
I was at an exchange. I've worked my entire career in Bitcoin, which is kind of insane now, but I started out at an exchange in South Africa called Luno. I was really lucky. I got to work on the crypto team, but it was only Bitcoin back then. And it was me and the CTO and the engineering lead. And we did all of the Bitcoin stuff, got to do some of the batching. And then as we added Ethereum, I got this terrible Ethereum project and I had to work on it for 6 months and I hated it. And I realized all the ways that Ethereum is broken. And they said, okay, now you can choose your own project. And I said, oh, I want to do this Lightning thing. And they let me roll out Lightning in production in 2018, which was maybe not the best idea, but it was a great project. And that's kind of how I found Chaincode and all of these things.
Oh, so they rolled out Lightning onto the exchange?
Yeah.
So you must have been one of the first exchanges to do that.
Yeah, we only had it on the API. So only me and a few other people used it, but it was really early on. Got to chat to the people at Lightning Labs, how I got to know them for the first time and use it and see all the warts and figure it out for myself.
So what was the leap from that into Chaincode?
I was at the exchange, I just finished this Lightning integration and I just saw it on Twitter and I was like, oh, that seems cool. I never thought I would get it. In 1,000 years, I never thought I would get it. I applied for it, did a coding challenge, an interview, and then, yeah.
How many people tend to apply?
I don't know how many applied for that one, but it ended up with 8 of us staying for the full summer. We're running a program now, And you don't get a lot of people. We got a few hundred people who applied for our new program, which is a sort of part-time thing, Introduction to FOSS. But it's very difficult to reach outside of the Bitcoin bubble, right? You put things on Twitter, a few people who are already interested see it, but putting this thing out there as, yes, this is Bitcoin, but this is also like such a fascinating engineering project. You know, there is any topic that you have in a computer science classroom in university that is in some way related to Bitcoin work, because it's distributed systems and it's networking and it's security and it's all of these things. So really, you can find your interest in it no matter who you are. But I don't think that really reaches outside of the very small Bitcoin development community.
They still do the residency, do they?
The residency went on pause, but it's something we're thinking about booting back up. But in the meantime, we've been running seminars online. So the content that we did in the residency, we run over about 8 weeks. You get some questions, you get some reading, you get together every week to talk about them, and then you close it out with an expert for like a 30-minute chat. So we've still managed to put that content out there, but not in the format of the residency for a while.
And so at Chaincode, you're thrown straight in there. You suddenly got access to rock stars of core development. Yeah,
I mean, being in that Chaincode office was kind of insane for me. Like just the people you got to chat to that you'd only seen on YouTube and Twitter and on screens, and suddenly they're kind of around and available and all so much more giving with their time and human than you thought they would be.
Who Peter Willey?
Peter wasn't there when I was there, but Matt was there, James O'Byrne was there, Carl Dong was there. It was a great group.
Yeah. We had Matt on the show last week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we were talking about scaling Bitcoin. So, okay, when you first, because one of the things I try and imagine with Bitcoin is that it must be a very large, dense amount of code. Bear in mind, I'm not technical in any way at all, but I assume when you first look in, it's like, how do you even start? I have a very small experience of coding, by the way. I think I told you this. So my advertising career, at the very start, I used to make stuff in Flash. Do you remember Flash? The animated stuff on the internet? And they used to have a thing called ActionScript. And so I learned to code ActionScript. Oh. So I remember things called arrays.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Where it's like, do you know what an array is? No. It's like a collection. It's like a collection of things.
Yeah. So it's a list of things.
List of things. You put it into an array. And I, but what I really remember, it took a long time for me to click. I remember one day, there's a day when like programming clicks that you realize it's like this logical process that it has to go through. And so I did a small amount. I was telling things like to move across the screen or bounce around. It's very limited. But I can't imagine the amount, like how do you even get your head around when you first start on Bitcoin? Like you've got this like huge pile of code and files and you don't know what touches what. Where do you even start?
I think that's definitely one of the hardest things with Bitcoin projects is that there aren't a lot of new Bitcoin projects, right? It's generally very big code bases, very old code bases, and code bases like Bitcoin Core. Not that that's what I work on, but they have a lot of legacy code that isn't written optimally and is quite difficult to understand. So a lot of the work that people do now is refactoring and cleaning up that code and making it modular. But when you first want to get into it as a dev, like this is a problem in open source, but also a problem in Bitcoin because it's open source. Like you need to find one small thing to do. And some repos are better at others at like making issues, writing what needs to be done and adding tags on GitHub. So we have help wanted, we have good first issue. There are various standard things you can label tasks with, which say, hey, like pick this up, maybe do this. But you pick up an issue and then you have to just not give up. Okay. And if you like, that's kind of all that working in Bitcoin open source is. It's not giving up on a bunch of hard stuff for a very long time. And every once in a while you get something right.
What was the first thing you did then?
The first thing I did was when I was at the exchange and we were adding Lightning, they have this API that we would use and they didn't surface the information that we needed for like a production scale audited exchange. So I put in a pull request it was nice. It was like a needs-based thing. Like my company needs this thing. We use this software, adding this field, surfacing this information. And that got in sort of 1 or 2 releases later, which was like very cool. I was like, oh, look at me. But yeah, starting small and then slowly working your way up into larger and larger things, but also spending the time to familiarize yourself with the code base. And one of the biggest and most helpful ways you can do that in open source is to help with review. This isn't something that's like as glamorous or as fun as writing your own code, but looking at other people's code, looking at the discussion that people that understand the code base are having on it. So seeing how they think about trade-offs and where things are more sensitive, like it helps you build the context for the project. But I mean, I think optimistically it takes 6 months to understand a code base, probably more like a year. And even then, that's only the areas of a code base that I can say, I know 6 of the 20 areas of L&D really well, which is what I work on a lot. No one has a full in-depth understanding of every single piece of a code base, except for maybe the person that first wrote it. And even them, it will change and grow beyond what you can keep track of.
Is that an issue?
I don't think it's an issue, provided you have enough people looking at code. Right? Like if you're sitting by yourself and you're writing this massive repository and maybe it's 3 people and everyone just pushes their code in, that's a big problem. But the way that code goes into Bitcoin projects is incredibly well reviewed, incredibly high standards of review. And so the risk is often that you have sort of 2 different systems in a code base and one has a side effect on the other that you weren't expecting. But we're so well reviewed, we're so well tested. Once code gets out in Bitcoin, we tag RCs, so release candidates, and say, please run this release candidate. Bitcoin Core even puts out a testing guide saying, please test all of these features. Please check that everything, all of your software, everything you want is working properly on testnet or signet.
And who's testing that? You guys?
I mean, everyone should test it. But yeah, the engineers that write the code will then go through the testing guide. People like businesses who need to upgrade their software version eventually will, roll the new Bitcoin Core version out on testnet because you have your whole stack on testnet, run it for a few weeks, make sure everything's okay, then go and roll it out to mainnet. So it is a very rigorous process.
Does that mean, though, that there's very, very rare occasion where something goes live and it breaks something?
I mean, there are always bugs.
Yeah.
Bugs are a reality of software engineering, but I think that the standards that we have in Bitcoin, you're never going to roll something out and it has like a crash bug, which means that you run the software and it dies. But it might have a subtle bug where something goes wrong and it needs fixing. Like no promises, but it's very seldom that or almost never that an egregious bug will get into a piece of Bitcoin software.
And are there different types of bugs that you have to think about? So you've mentioned there is a crash bug, and maybe there's bugs where something doesn't work. But is there ever a risk of a bug whereby someone can lose their Bitcoin? They could go to send some Bitcoin and that bug could cause that to just be burned and lost.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, depends how much you test your software, right? If you're writing a wallet and you add a feature that allows you to send coins in a certain way and it's invalid, you're done, right? That's why you test it. Those bugs do exist. I would say that if that kind of bug made it into, even like got merged into master, so you create a pull request, it's reviewed, then it gets merged into the code base. If something like that gets merged, it means the standard of review in the code base is problematic. And that is not the case in any major Bitcoin software engineering projects.
Do you remember that interview we did with Austin Hill? And he was talking about like the standard of development with Bitcoin needs to be up there with similar nuclear power stations.
Yeah, like rockets.
And rockets, like that kind of engineering. Like Bitcoin engineering has to be the best engineering in the world because it cannot fail. Like if you had a catastrophic bug in like a rocket, people die. You have a catastrophic bug in a nuclear generation facility, it can blow up and people die. And Bitcoin has to be the same because if you have a massive catastrophic bug, it can destroy the entire confidence of the whole system.
Yeah.
It's not like the banks. If the banks have a bug in their system, they can roll back your money that you owed. But like Bitcoin can't do that.
No, there isn't really any space for mistakes. Like Bitcoin has, I think, 99.9% uptime. We haven't gone down in over a decade, I think. And yeah, it's critical engineering work. It's very difficult engineering work. That means that it's very slow. It can be very frustrating to work on it because things can sit for months or years. They either take a very long time in review or they don't get review at all because even starting to look at something like that is so challenging and you'd rather kind of write your own code and hope that somebody looks at that. But it's a really difficult part of Bitcoin engineering is working on something, attracting review for it, and then making sure that the amount of review it gets is up to the standard of Bitcoin. And if it isn't, it will just wait and sit for ages.
And how is the culture created with that? Does everyone understand the culture, or do people establish the culture? So when you come in, you fully understand this?
I think that it's learned as you come in.
Yeah.
I think that lots of people, arrive at a project and they open a big PR and they say, look, this is wonderful. I've created some code for you. And this isn't just a Bitcoin project problem. This is an open source problem. But there isn't the understanding that will take time to review. It will need to be tested. It will need to be maintained forever or removed from the code base. And it's a big learning curve when you arrive in Bitcoin open source to understand, one, that your contribution can and will cost more than it benefits for a while when you arrive. And because of that, you need to stick around, you need to be serious about this, and you need to give back wherever you can. It's difficult to give back in the beginning because you're new and you don't understand much, but managing the cost of ramping up in a project with the benefit that you can provide is a very delicate thing. And if you do it wrong, you just won't be able to move forward with the work because people won't want to review your things, you won't get traction, and you'll get frustrated and move on eventually.
So you end up earning a reputation then?
Yeah, and it's difficult because if you haven't worked in open source before, it's just not a culture that you're familiar with. There's a great book. I know telling people to read a book is a bit annoying, but it's called Working in Public. And it's someone who used to work at GitHub who wrote out all these different cultures and ways of interacting with open source. And it's for people who work in it, it seems pretty obvious, but it's a good account of things that you need to be considerate of when you start working in these sort of communities, right? No one pays all of us to work on Bitcoin. It's a very fractured environment of different companies like Chaincode and grant-giving organizations. There is no product manager. There's no one telling you what to do. So you need to be able to navigate that landscape efficiently and considerately.
And therefore, I guess some people just get spat out by it.
Yeah. They'll get frustrated and they'll leave, and that isn't zero cost, right? You'll show up with, because people who work in Bitcoin are very generous and lovely, and they'll review things as they come in. But if someone's not serious about sticking around, that does end up costing you time and not really giving you anything on the other end.
So the options are you can go and work for Google, get paid hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars a year, work in this beautiful campus, have lots of benefits, maybe get options and become a millionaire. Or you can go and work on Bitcoin, where it takes ages to get stuff through. It's a fractured community. You will sometimes have beg, borrow, and stealing to get funded to do it. So, what is the attraction? You've got to be.
Yeah, I feel like
It's
it's not just like Bitcoin. I think I came for Bitcoin, but I stayed for what the work is. Because you can go work at Google, but first of all, are you working on something that's important to you? Because often, not even at the Google level, just at the regular engineering level, you don't often get to work on meaningful or interesting things. There's a lot of grunt work in engineering, but the freedom that you get working in Bitcoin open source is insane. Very few funding organizations give any kind of direction as to what they want you to work on. You propose a project or a piece of work that you want to do, and they give you funding for that. And then you have freedom to go about that as you like. You can do it remotely. You can choose exactly who you collaborate with. You don't have to work with people you don't like. You escape the age-old battle, as old as the battle between good and evil, the battle between the software engineer and the product manager. There is no one telling you what to do. And you get to work on these amazingly interesting, impactful engineering problems that it's just engineering cool. It's Bitcoin cool because it's Bitcoin. That's kind of a given. But the nature of the work is so interesting and so inviting for someone who is interested in computers and coding and the way that these things work.
Do you think Bitcoin is not let's get away from the bias of thinking it's cool, but is it one of the most challenging engineering projects in the world with regards to technology, code?
I think that it is definitely one of the most complex systems there is out there because it's a distributed system. It's a adversarial peer-to-peer environment. It's got sort of this cryptography and this layer that is very difficult to understand compared to the majority of engineering jobs. I'd say that is true. But, as you say, there's nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
That's a little more serious to me.
And I guess, you have to be mission driven then. Like, I suppose when, because we saw you when we were out in Africa, we're there at the Bitcoin conference, where you're starting to see the impact that Bitcoin have around the world. Does that help? You're like, I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's kind of how I got here. Like I said, I've done this my whole life.
Yeah.
I studied CS and economics, so this is a pretty obvious endpoint for me.
Keynesian economics.
No, like development economics. Economics that I already knew I was going to do computer science. I did a year of econ. I was like, I'm just going to do the economics of war, guns, and terror because I think it's cool. And I'm never going to get a job from this, but I have my computer science already in the bag. So not helpful, but interesting. I did the CS degree, and people say to you when you do CS, the world is your oyster. You can do anything. And then I was like, I can do anything. And I went and looked for a job, and I was like, I can do anything. I don't want to do any of these things. Work in insurance, work for Amazon, like have your life taken away from you. Nothing was something that I wanted to do. And then I had a friend who was working at the exchange at the time, and he's like, hey, I'm doing this Bitcoin thing. And I'd heard of it, and I thought it was cool. So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Because out there's
How challenging is this environment for getting funding for developers at the moment? Are we getting more developers but not at the increase at the rate we need? Is it not keeping up with the growth and needs of Bitcoin? Or have we got a decreasing rate or a steady state?
Bringing people in is a very interesting problem. Specifically to me right now, we're running this program, Intro to Fast. It actually starts on Wednesday, I think. And we've got 300 people in this program. And there are not 300 people working on Bitcoin open source today.
Oh, wow.
And it is a part-time program. It is, a model where people will go through modules and peel off, and not everyone will finish it. And that is by design, to give people an opportunity to do their proof of work and go through. But we cannot absorb hundreds and hundreds of engineers, right? So the problem is not the quantity of people. I think realistically, Bitcoin Core could take on 5 serious contributors a year, maybe 10. But the problem is not the number. The problem is finding the right people that will try and try and try and not give up, and that will, in the long run, benefit us more than they cost us when they arrive. As we were talking about people showing up and doing things and taking up people's time, as long as the people that show up and consume resources and mentorship and time in the beginning, as long as they turn into something, then we're doing it right. But it's very difficult to figure out who that's going to be.
Yeah, how do you test for that? You can test someone's coding competency, but how do you test for resiliency? How do you test for culture?
Need some Navy SEALs training.
Yeah.
This is a terrible thing to say, but I always joke about it. Say, can you eat shit a little bit? Can you debug something really difficult, really unrewarding, and push through that last thing to figure it out and get it done? And it sounds a bit corny to say, but we always talk about a Chaincode. Let people do proof of work, right? Do hard things, do them well, and keep showing up and keep trying. And that's what you're going to have to do in the job anyway.
Is the funding getting better? Because over the last few years, we've had OpenSats, HRF have been putting a lot of money in, Brink.
I think it's difficult to say because we kind of had I think of it in 2 phases. And the phase that we were sort of around when I was in the residency was the altcoin funded phase, right? No one in Bitcoin was paying for Bitcoin development. And I don't think people like to acknowledge this, but it was the Coinbases, it was the Geminis, it was the people that made money off the other coins were giving money to developers. And it was really in 2019, when people exited the residency, it was difficult to find funding to work on Bitcoin. And then around the time of some collapse, Celsius collapse, so one of the things that happened over there in that place, that funding went away. Coinbase paused, Gemini paused, exchanges stopped giving money that they did. And all of the organizations, some of them Chaincode are long-term funded, which we're very lucky to be, but people were in real trouble. People were losing grants, organizations had less than a year's runway. And since then, it's got a little bit better, and it's really promising seeing that ETF profits will go towards various organizations. But it more or less went from being the era of altcoin funding to the era of Jack giving people a lot of money, right? And that is great. Like, it's so generous of him, so kind. I'm on the board of Btrust. He funds that organization. He's given a lot of money to OpenSats. I'm not sure if he's donated to Brink, but like, he's been incredibly generous. He cares about Bitcoin a lot. But other than that, there hasn't been like this. There is no big sustainable amount of money flowing into Bitcoin. Maybe that'll be the case with the ETF and that kind of thing. But
I think when things get going again, because we harassed Tyler and Cameron.
And Brian. You got
was it
Brian
Brian?
to do it as
Did
well.
I get Brian?
Both.
Huh. I didn't know that. I forgot that.
Yeah, you did. I'm
Did
pretty sure in the interview you made.
Oh yeah, no, I
Brian
did.
commit to it.
When we interview, if we do the second interview, I'll do it again. Get him to restart.
No,
it.
he won't do it.
I forgot about it. Yeah, in the interview, I said, I don't know what I said. What did I say? Why don't you
Fund
fund
Bitcoin devs.
Yeah, fund Bitcoin devs, and he did, and then Tyler and Cameron. So I think it was like 3 or 4, and I'm sure. I know, like, the exchanges go through a tough time in the bear markets. You have to look at things you cut. This is a thing they cut, but I'm sure we can harass them again.
Yeah.
Once things start going again. But you say there's what is there? A couple of hundred people working on?
it depends where you draw the line. But if you just say Bitcoin Core and all of the Lightning implementations, like 4 of them, less than 100 people.
Okay, but you could only absorb about 5 a year
Into Core.
The
other
okay.
projects also need some devs, and they are more able to absorb engineering talent than Bitcoin Core.
And are we getting is the talent good? And is there a good cycle of the talent? Because, there'll become times where some of the very experienced, brilliant developers we have will get a bit tired. They want to do other things, want to slow down. Is the right talent coming through? Is it something to worry about, or is it something it's fine, but you should worry about it because it means you're always on top of it?
It's difficult to say with that because we find good people, right? We really do. We find amazing people, and they just kind of arrive. There'll be someone, they'll show up in a repo, they're great, and then they succeed in this and they get a grant. But we're definitely not. I don't think that we are appealing to the engineering public, call it. People who work at Amazon, Google, Facebook can make way more money there. So why would they switch? People who are junior have a very hard time finding their feet in this unstructured environment, though many people have made great careers coming straight out of university. But we're not winning that recruiting battle. We aren't as exciting as the other coins, and we don't pay as much as the big tech companies. So it's really still the people that find Bitcoin interesting who are brave enough to take the leap. And maybe that's okay, because I don't know if we want engineers that don't care about Bitcoin working on it, but I think there are certainly lots of engineers that could care about Bitcoin, but they just kind of hear noise and brush it aside.
What do you think of ordinals?
I don't really think much about them, honestly.
I think that
people have the right to use Bitcoin however they like.
Okay, so if it's a valid transaction, you're okay.
Yeah.
Because a big conversation we had with Pete Rizzo the other day was he's a Bitcoin maximalist in terms of he's a platform maximalist? He's an everything maximalist, isn't he? But he talks about different types of maximalists. I think I'm a monetary maximalist. I think Bitcoin's the best form of money, or the other shitcoins will die. They go to zero. But he's also a platform maximalist in that he thinks everything that is built on other shitcoins will always come back to Bitcoin. And so he said one of the things Bitcoin failed to do was to win over Silicon Valley. They can't make money off Bitcoin, and they invest in shitcoins because they get their token allocation early on. They can dump on retail. They make loads of money on things that don't find product market fit. It's completely bullshit, but it happens. But he said one of the great things about ordinals is it's bringing to Bitcoin things that would traditionally have been done on other chains. And if that trajectory continues, that will bring more funding, whether it's BRC20 or JPEGs, whatever bullshit they want to bring. And that then could bring more development to Bitcoin. Personally, I don't like the trade-off, but it's a reality he's talked about. Is that being spoken about within your dev circles? And could that potentially be, I didn't even think about that, but could potentially bring the wrong developers? Or are they not? Are there brilliant developers working on shitcoins that you wish they were working on Bitcoin?
I don't know that the standard of engineering in other coins is kind of close to us. Doesn't mean that there aren't good devs working there. They have interesting problems to solve as well. I think as for quirky.
Is it a culture thing?
It's a culture thing for sure. Like it's strange, like talking to, I have dev friends from uni who do normie jobs, and I talk about Bitcoin. It's, it's so slow and conservative. And they're like, what do you mean? You do like crazy internet money stuff. I'm like, well, we are like in one way, like incredibly experimental and fringe and all of these things. But like the way in which we build this thing is far more slow and careful and conservative than any other dev work that anyone I know does. So it is like a strange difference in how we're marketed versus how we behave, at least on the engineering side. In terms of ordinals possibly bringing funding to development, I don't think that kind of economic activity would really. I don't really believe the funding would trickle down, honestly.
Right.
That's kind of what I think. I think it would lead to people taking some of the behaviors that you've seen on Ethereum and bringing them to Bitcoin, and people who are doing that kind of behavior don't strike me as the kind of folks that are contributing to open source development efforts.
They're just degen traders.
Do you know what? I think that's the point I didn't articulate or get across to Rizzo well enough, is that my worry is the culture shift that brings.
Yeah.
Like we're already seeing with the Wizard peeps, the culture shift that's bringing. And it is a different culture. And it's not that it's not that I've got anything against their culture, but when I sit here and listen to you or any other dev explain the culture of and the importance of that culture of how Bitcoin is developed, that cultural shift does worry me.
Yeah. It's like chalk and cheese.
Yeah, it's like they want to bash down the doors and just do a bunch of crazy shit quickly. And it does worry me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, but this is open source. Like, no one is gonna like bust down the doors of Bitcoin Core and start like merging PRs every 10 minutes. So like, if people want to do that, they're like welcome to fork things and do their own thing. And like, that's the nice thing about Bitcoin. You can do what you want, and people are free to do what they want, be it ordinals or like whatever else it is. They can run other implementations if they like at their own risk, I would say, because Bitcoin Core is like a very high standard to meet, and you would need another project to really, pick up a lot of momentum to spin up another implementation. And I don't
like
mean
Knots.
Well, Knots is like a single person project. So, and it's a downstream fork, of course. So it's just Core with some stuff changed. But it just doesn't really seem like a problem to me. It seems, these people that would come in for this activity wouldn't be working on Bitcoin Core, wouldn't be working on Lightning implementations. They'd be doing their own thing. They have the right to do their own thing. I wouldn't put my money in it, but
So while Bitcoin can have multiple implementations, and if you wanted to, you can go and build your own implementation. They'll be interoperable. Bitcoin benefits from really Core being the primary implementation, the monopoly.
I think that there is a world in which we could have a more diverse set of implementations. This isn't really my specialization as a Lightning person.
You will know more about it than us.
Yeah, true. But
what's the argument for multiple implementations?
The argument for multiple implementations is that you can have things be more customizable. So maybe you care more or less about a denial of service mempool, and you can just plug in a mempool of your choosing to your custom node implementation. Or you can, move faster because Bitcoin Core is very slow, and perhaps you want to be a bit more experimental and have something different. But that would only really be practically doable if we had sort of a consensus library. So for consensus, we all have the same code because that's really important. And pulling that out is an ongoing project in Core, but it's a very difficult thing to do. But then even if we had a consensus library that we all used, you still run into issues like, ages ago, Bitcoin accidentally forked because they upgraded the database version. And some read limit, I don't remember exactly what it is before my time, some read limit on the database was hit and the network forked. So it is like a really dangerous thing to do. But I would say that because Bitcoin Core doesn't really deprecate versions, there's so many versions of Bitcoin Core that are supported and in still running that you already kind of have that risk that across versions of the same software, you'll break things. So
Did you just go around in a circle and come back to, we should just one implementation is preferable?
I think that one implementation is easier.
Okay. Would Lightning benefit from there being one implementation?
I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
We have,
it was a leading question.
Yeah.
Because I know there's some interoperability issues. That means you need to have some coordination.
Yeah.
And I know it's causing issues.
Yeah, and even just if you think about like people get quite frustrated with the amount of time things take in Lightning. It's like, yeah, because we have to do everything 4 times. Like it takes a lot of time and a lot of engineering. And I remember we had our summit in June here in New York, and we were like, oh, what if we all just got rid of everything and had one implementation? And I don't think it would work because Lightning is much more something where you want a specific thing, right? Bitcoin Core, you want Bitcoin Core, right? You want to do Bitcoin stuff. But Lightning is so sort of multifaceted in the way that you use it. Like you want a big routing node, so you're going to run async, or you want a very specific thing to hook into your existing system, so you'll run LDK. And even if we did all get together and do one implementation, I think that it would end up splitting out into 1 or 2 different things because you want like different types of Lightning participants. Whereas Bitcoin, pretty much you just have one type of Bitcoin participant, which is give me transactions, I'll send you what I have.
Why were you so drawn to Lightning?
Just because it is the thing that makes Bitcoin usable for people from where I'm from, honestly.
Eventually 99% of Bitcoin users, really.
Yeah. It seems like an obvious thing that if everyone is going to be able to use Bitcoin, there needs to be something like Lightning. And Lightning is still the most compelling scaling option for Bitcoin to me. And we spoke about this the last time I was on the pod, but like when I came to New York in 2019, like South African, legally here, working for a great company, couldn't get a bank account. And that's ridiculous to me that like just because you're in a different place, you're like no longer allowed to be paid or transact. And it's a very difficult thing to have to manage and deal with. And yeah, it's just
you should explain this because like not everyone will have heard that first show. It's quite a situation you were in.
Yeah. I was at the residency. I was working for 3 months. We were very fortunate to be paid to work on Bitcoin. So I was like, oh, this is magic. And I was living in an Airbnb, which means that you don't have a proof of address. And I needed a bank account here, and Chaincode couldn't pay out to a South African bank account because who in America can pay out to a South African bank account? And I went to the bank and I tried to get an account and I needed proof of address. So then I went and tried to buy a PO box, which was super sketchy, and they wouldn't give me a bank account with a PO box. And what I ended up doing every 2 weeks, because pay cycle's 2 weeks here, is getting a paper check. And I was like, this is crazy, a piece of paper. And walking across the road to the bank where I would cash it into cash. And all South Africans, then I would like hold this cash very tightly and very terrifiedly and like run across the road to the pharmacy where I would buy prepaid credit cards with the cash, where you can only put like, I think $300 on them each at a time. So I'd buy like 4 credit cards. I remember when you went onto the sites for these cards, they were HTTP sites. They didn't even use secure websites for these credit cards. And then I had this like drawer of cash. I have a great picture somewhere of like cash and credit cards. And I would like take 3 credit cards out with me because I didn't know which one had any balance. And I didn't want to use the sketchy website to check the balance. So it was really like
it's such a Bitcoin story.
Yeah.
Like I think everyone has one where what's your Bitcoin like money's broken story?
I don't think I have one.
You don't have one.
What's yours?
Well, I've got I mean, look, my main Bitcoin story is my mum, right?
Yeah, true.
Do you know about my mum? Yeah. So like just getting cannabis oil. But I also had the one where had the guy in Japan. I couldn't pay this guy in Japan. I put all his bank details into my bank. Could not pay him. He said it failed. And I was like, I had to pay. Like I went out to interview. Who was I interviewing out in Japan? Mount Gox. Yeah. Oh, what's his name? What is he?
I can't remember his name.
Proof I always forget everyone's name.
Yeah, but I can't remember his name either.
Gox guy. Anyway, so I got the camera guy and I got back and I just couldn't pay him. So I can't pay you. He's like, what do you mean you can't? I was like, I can't pay you. I've put in your bank details. I was like, here's a screenshot. My bank cannot connect to your bank.
Mark Carpellis, yeah.
Couldn't do PayPal. So it was like, you need to take Bitcoin. And I just think everyone has one of those. Hold on, why didn't Chaincode pay you in Bitcoin?
it's very difficult to hold Bitcoin in New York City.
Oh.
Yeah, New York and North Korea are like pretty much on a par with Bitcoin, I think.
It's just Ben Lawski's fault.
Yeah.
It's a bit licensed,
The bit license.
That motherfucker. They need to get rid of that bit license. Repeal the bit license.
So I don't know if you'll be happy talking about this, but when we were in Africa, you were saying that you thought one of the areas that needed funding for Bitcoin devs was therapy. You said this.
You did.
Oh my God, Danny.
What? Talk about throwing under the bus.
If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to.
Yeah, I mean,
When did this happen on the Vibe bus? I don't remember this.
this is the sad corner of the Vibe bus, clearly. This is right after my head hit the ceiling in the car.
Oh, that was so funny. That was so funny.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I'll
please.
talk about it.
Yeah, you didn't tell me this.
I think it's very difficult working Bitcoin open source. I think that it is great. Like, I don't want to just come on and make it sound like this is a terrible thing. This is the best job. I hope I have this job for the rest of my life. But it's very challenging sitting in these long hold kind of patterns for work and being in an environment where no one will ever tell you did well. Like, maybe they'll say, oh, nice PR, nice this. But if you think about a normal working environment, like, you have reviews and you have management, you have people like helping you grow, and you're completely by yourself in this like existential hole, right? You have all of this freedom, you can do whatever you want. And when you're in the moments where you know what you want to do, it's fantastic. But when you're in the moments where you don't, it's really hard. And no one is really there to help you. Though some organizations will have more or less support. And like at Btrust, I do check-ins with all the devs on our team. Not that there's that many people, but trying to make sure that there's a person that you can talk to that understands what you're doing. And I think the other side of it is just like the amount of drama there is in Bitcoin is kind of undeniable. And there'll be times when that will fall on the devs. And I think I feel very lucky to be a Lightning person because this very much happens more to Bitcoin core folks than it does to Lightning folks. But it's really rough when something happens, people don't like the way something's gone down, and hundreds of people will pile into a pull request on GitHub and say horrible things about you or say that it's bad or,
This is a whole world I don't know. So it's basically like our YouTube, right? We make a show, people don't like it, they go on and they shout at me, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know that's a thing that happens in GitHub.
It doesn't happen often, but it certainly has happened with like things that people disagree about. There'll be certain issues that just like become the place in which this is debated. And it's not the appropriate forum for it, right? GitHub is a place to review code. It's not a place to discuss features. And
Can you not disable comments?
Well, that's what ends up happening, right? Eventually the issue will be locked. And then someone will go into Twitter and say, oh, so-and-so is controlling Bitcoin and censoring me and doing all these things. And
Danny's right. Don't read the comments.
Don't read the comments, but you have to because your job is to address those comments. That's your work.
Yeah.
And I think it's like sort of a missing piece. Like there needs to be somewhere between Twitter and GitHub where people can express their opinions about what features they would like and what features they wouldn't like. Because right now it's like 30 people doing customer service for the entire Bitcoin population and it's not scalable. Maybe that's a mailing list, maybe that's a forum, but it's really rough when that happens with things that become controversial on Twitter and they leak into your everyday and you have to deal with them.
I don't think many people can understand what it's like when the internet comes after you. I don't know if you personally had it.
The internet has never come after me, and that's why I'm so scared of doing podcasts. Like you guys know, I didn't really want to do this.
Well, you should. You're brilliant. Yeah. You should do more. And your coding's brilliant.
Thanks, Pete.
Apparently, I checked your arrays.
Yeah. They're very good. Thank you.
But you should do more. You are brilliant. You talk about it really well, and it's we're really glad you're here and doing this. I know you didn't really want to do it. I know.
I don't want to do it because I don't want people to shout at me on the internet. Like I just don't want to go through that.
There's nothing with it. Yeah, but they will shout. They might shout at you in GitHub.
Hopefully not, though.
But some people, you're clearly explaining that some people are experiencing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it sucks.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is when I say the internet comes after you, I mean, even in that environment, it's awful.
Yeah.
And I don't think some people truly understand what it's like. It's mentally very damaging. Danny is my therapist for these situations, but it is very challenging. And Bitcoin, I don't know if it's unique to Bitcoin. I mean, I'm sure it happens elsewhere, but Bitcoin is a hostile place to be. I didn't know it went down as far as the GitHub comments on. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think that what's different in Bitcoin, I guess, is kind of the Twitter folks coming over to Bitcoin, to like the technical side. I don't want to sound like a gatekeeper that's saying like people don't have the right to participate in the open process. That's why it's really difficult to navigate this whole thing.
But are they participating in something they don't really understand?
I mean, maybe it is something that they do understand, but it's just like, it's like me listening to the podcast and deciding that I don't like that you guys do enough Lightning episodes, and getting 100 of my friends and walking into your office and screaming at you that you don't do enough Lightning episodes, right? There is a place to have these conversations. And I think that...
Do we not do enough Lightning episodes? Are you like subtly making a point here?
I don't know.
You gaslighting us.
That's not gaslighting. I'm not gaslighting you, to be silly.
All right, we'll do more Lightning episodes. Go on.
Yeah, but I think that like trying to find a way, and as Bitcoin grows, this is one of those things which is not just developers' responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. Like, how do we find an efficient and appropriate way to talk about the way we would like Bitcoin to change? Because it's not on Twitter and it's not on GitHub. It's not only on GitHub, right? GitHub is, by the time you get to GitHub, it should have been roughly decided how things are going to go. It shouldn't be that we kind of all decide we want to argue about things on the pull request. That seems insane to me.
Is there a better way of doing it? Like, God, I'm going to try and say this in the most sensitive way possible, but I'm definitely going to piss some people off who listen to this. When I had my ad agency, it was really a web dev agency. You know, we built websites. We built PHP websites. We had a team of developers, team of designers, UX people. We had account managers, account holders. Like, we had the full stack. Developers almost never made good managers. It was just a thing. Developers are like the geniuses who build the backbone, but they're never project managers, and they very rarely would make it to like a board level because it's a different set of skills, right? And could it be that the way Bitcoin is, which is, is a FOSS project and it's open source and it's distributed, that it's missing that hierarchy that exists within a normal company where you have got people who are good at managing people. You have a head of HR. I guess what you're saying, there's no HR structure.
Yeah.
But a HR structure, that person is somebody who has the skills, the empathy, and ability to understand the needs of all the people that exist within that. So should we be funding a HR person for Bitcoin development?
I mean, we can't, right? Yeah. Like, I think that...
But do you understand, is that the gap that's missing? Because it's just a bunch of developers trying to figure stuff out together.
No, because I think that, like, in the technical community, we know what needs to be built, right? We know where the problems are. We know where we need to build things. Where it gets really fuzzy is what features need to be added to Bitcoin.
I don't know if you've understood the point I'm trying to make.
No, I understand that like you need an HR person to like work between these two like different groups, right? The user group and the technical group.
No, that's the project manager. The HR person is purely, their job is to look after all people and make sure everyone's okay.
It's very difficult to introduce that kind of structure to Bitcoin, right? It's decentralized. You don't want central figures in Bitcoin.
Yeah, but I'm not even saying central figure. It's just somebody who amongst the community as just checks in on everyone. Let's call it.
This is kind of why I say grants for therapy, right? And then people can like use that as they will. I think that a one or two central figures would be a really bad idea. But I mean, as an example, like at Btrust, like I would like to eventually have a manager that the people who work on open source get to check in with, or that type of resource. But I think the idea of having one or two folks is a very bad idea. But having that kind of resource available to people working on Bitcoin, I'm like, yeah, that would be great.
Is this a topic that is certainly an issue but not being discussed, or is it being discussed but in side circles?
I don't think it's, look, maybe this is me. Maybe this is just my opinion. But okay. I think that the people I have worked with and the people that I'm friends with who do Bitcoin engineering, like the loneliness and the difficulty comes up often. And having some type of support for that would be good.
Yeah.
Grants are amazing and they cover your expenses, and you're very, very lucky to work on Bitcoin open source. But like, as you said, like when you work in other places, you have different support and you don't have that. And that's on your own dime most of the time. And that means it's not going to happen. All
right, let's talk a little bit more about Lightning. Okay. How's it going? Look, it's been a bit of, obviously, we made a show with Matt in Miami
in May.
Mm-hmm. And the high fee environment has introduces some challenges for Lightning. We've been discussing scaling Bitcoin recently because of this ongoing question we have about, can you be self-sovereign if you don't own a UTXO? We're at the conclusion that you basically can't be. So we're thinking about this a lot. again, not technical. I don't know what's going on with Lightning. Do you want to just give us the lay of the land? Because I certainly have recognized some people. Some people have said Lightning has failed. I don't think it has. Some people have said Lightning is struggling to perform as it needs to in a high fee environment. I don't think that's entirely true, but it'd be good just to get a complete lay of the land from you.
Yeah. I think that it's fair to say Lightning is struggling somewhat in the high fee environment. I think that, obviously, I don't think Lightning has failed because I'm still here and I'm still working on it. I think that Lightning has a very long to-do list and people are reasonably frustrated with it. And I think there's been this big divide between the way that we talk about Lightning, Lightning is so new and exciting and it's going to be just like Visa, and the technical reality of what Lightning is and how difficult it is to build. And I think it's like even on this podcast, I'm not sure if it was, but folks like Rusty saying this is a 20-year project. And that was a few years ago, but people like Matt saying maybe don't open up channels with people that you don't know, or maybe if you think someone will attack you, don't, just open up channels with anyone. But I think what is lost in the frustration with Lightning is how much of Lightning's issues today we do know how to fix, but we haven't got around to fixing, and which of them are like completely unknown things that we can't fix.
Can I throw two questions in? Mm-hmm. You say there's a long list.
Yeah.
Is that a static list of really important things, or does that list keep getting added to and it's getting bigger and bigger as Lightning expands? It's like, shit, we need this, we need that. Is it that? And my second question is, how much of this is we've built something in Lightning, it's introduced all these new problems, we need to fix these, this is introduced, like, is it just such a complex thing that it's just constantly introducing new issues?
To the second question, I don't think we're introducing things and breaking things further, which is encouraging. We have
because that always feels what Ethereum is.
No, we're not like band-aiding the band-aid.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So I think it's kind of easy to break it down into security, privacy, and user experience. Right? Those are the three major things that I think about with Lightning, and it is a pretty set list, and it's a list that hasn't been much expanded. There are some things that are added on, like, people want the ability to receive offline. And that in the last year has been something that's got a bit of specification work. But I'll say the things that are like really the biggest piece that we need to think about whether we need a change in Bitcoin for Lightning is like you said, UTXO ownership, right? Lightning makes the security assumption that you can confirm a transaction on the blockchain in a certain period of time. And if you don't, you are at risk of losing money. And that is like, honestly, in a very high fee environment, that's not something we know how to fix, right? We don't have, there are many things that like, we need to fix privacy, we need to fix gossip. We have a proposal to fix gossip. We're busy writing it and we're going to implement it. But the issue of needing to have that settlement on chain, there are a few covenants that could be helpful, but there is no thing that we all have consensus on that we need to do to fix that. So a lot of the things that people are frustrated about, we do have fixes, but we're 30 people across 4 implementations. It's really not a lot of people doing it, and it just takes time.
But if you had less implementations, you could be more focused on these things.
We could. That's true.
Is that why when I asked you earlier, you think about less implementations because it could mean more focus?
Yeah.
Is that a controversial topic?
No, not really. I mean, again, this is Bitcoin. People like spin up implementations because they want to offer different things. I think that what Lightning's run into in the last 2 years, which we didn't previously, is that in the beginning, everyone was just getting the thing working. And everyone was doing the same stuff at the same time. We could quickly get interop. We could relatively quickly get the spec done and move forward. But now we're in the stage where there's various things to do, and what you choose to do depends on your set of priorities. And those are no longer completely lined up in the teams. And that's not controversial. It's just like how things go. Some people are interested in this, other people are interested in this. But because we need interop and spec review, it means that things take longer because everyone's working on a different thing.
That sounds stupid. Like it sounds inefficient and not good for Bitcoin.
It sounds inefficient and not good for Bitcoin. It's definitely not the most efficient, but I think that each implementation does serve a different use case. So if you had to tell me like, oh, kill one implementation, I wouldn't be able to put one on the chopping block, because then this person can't do this or this person can't do this. But
As a user, I don't understand implementations because I want to send Danny some Bitcoin. He shows me a Lightning address. I scan it and I click send. That's all I care about. So everything else I don't care. I don't understand why there needs to be different implementations. And again, this is maybe my super naive world, but I always try and come from the simple user world, is that all I think about with Lightning is I need to be able to see an address and send Bitcoin to it. That's all I need it to do. What am I missing?
What are you missing? So Danny's using Phoenix, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Phoenix runs on the async node, which is a massive node in the network. And that is a node and a company and an implementation that has thought a lot about the mobile use case. They've built in a lot of cool custom stuff to their implementation, although they have their implementation and then they have their Phoenix server. And it does a lot of the things that makes Danny's Lightning experience very sleek, right? And you are maybe running a wallet that relies on LND, and LND doesn't have that functionality, right? And Danny's ability to just receive with your QR code depends on that specialized server. Versus yours, maybe it's, you're running it on Raspberry Pi. It doesn't need that special functionality. So unlike Bitcoin, there are different roles in Lightning.
Yeah, and I've come up a couple of times where it's caused problems, where I think if we want to grow Bitcoin and Lightning payments to everyone, there is like a technical barrier we've created. So 2 examples. One is where I've tried to send from one Lightning it's clearly from one implementation to another. It's failed. And I can't remember which one it was.
It's failed like payment failed, or it failed like you couldn't scan QR code?
I couldn't scan or couldn't send. There was one, I can't remember, but a more important one was when we had an address and we had a donation address.
Oh, that's right. It was at the end of the video.
Yeah.
The Lebanon film, was it?
Yeah, and some people couldn't repeat. We had a donation address, and it had a bunch of donations come in, but we also had like people emailing us saying, I can't send to that.
Yeah, there were certain wallets that couldn't scan the QR code or whatever.
Yeah.
So that is probably not actually an implementation thing. I imagine you were using something called LNURL, which is a protocol built on top of Lightning, and not all wallets have that implemented.
It would have been a wallet to Satoshi address, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I imagine they have LNURL, and some people's wallets don't have that.
Yeah, those kind of things. I think of those as own goals.
Yeah, one of the things that's exciting to me about Lightning is how extensible it is, right? You can really you have a lot of freedom to do things in the protocol. We have a rule called it's okay to be odd, and protocol messages can either have an odd number or an even number, right? They have a type number. And if it's odd and you don't know what it is, you can just ignore it. If it's even and you don't know what it is, you cut the connection, because that's not something you understand. But all those odd fields, you can do all this custom stuff. You can put messages in it. You can someone built WhatsApp with Lightning. You can build all of these things in Lightning. That's what makes it cool and exciting and startup-y. But the downside is that people build all these different things, and then not everyone has the common standard implemented, just like this QR code that you're talking about. That's not even a protocol thing. Someone just built that because it was useful, but not everyone added it. And that's just not really solvable when people go off and do their own thing.
Yeah, and there was another one actually. I remember where I wanted to receive Bitcoin to an address, and the only way I could do it was to create an invoice. I couldn't just go, here's an address, just send to that. Send an amount you want to. I had to define the amount up front. It might have been earlier on.
That's very early on. That's something we did.
I think that was a Blue Wallet thing. But again, things like that I keep coming up against, and I'm like, it doesn't make sense. These things don't make sense sometimes. I kind of felt like Lightning wallets should be like base chain wallets, and here's an address, send to it.
Yeah, and we're getting there. But it is a different, there's a proposal called...
I know it's challenging. Defensive. I know it's challenging. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's difficult because I don't know what we can say except it takes really long. And if it took less time, it would be less good.
Well, I guess the question I'm getting to is what needs to happen to make Lightning... Is it just time, or is it investment?
I think that having more devs working on Lightning things would be really helpful.
Yeah.
I also think that there is a layer that is missing right now, not like a layer 1, layer 2, but there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing, with getting the user experience and like the barriers to like running a Lightning node up. Like it's bizarre to me that there isn't a company or a piece of software that you can just say, run my Lightning node for me.
Does Amboss not do that?
I don't think they do node management.
Oh, okay.
Right? They do like there's lots of markets to buy channels and all these things, but like just saying like just run this thing. I want it to run on my Raspberry Pi and I want it to work. And don't get me wrong, it's a really difficult problem, but like needing to care about channels and all of these things, it's not what people want to be able to do.
Shall I have one of my Bitcoin confessions?
What is it?
So I have these occasionally. It really piss people off. So about 2 years into doing the podcast, I confessed I hadn't ever set up a node. And I said, because I don't care. And people said, you should. I was like, but I don't. I always try and like think in terms of the general public, not the 1% of Bitcoin nerds. And then there was another one where I was like, I don't know what XPub is. People lost their shit.
I remember that one.
And I still don't care, because I'm like, for Bitcoin to work, people shouldn't know what XPub is or care. I have never opened a Lightning channel. Ever.
And it shows.
I know, but I never have. I've only ever used Lightning in a custodial way.
Yeah.
And I have and I've got a defensive argument for it. I'll give a background to this. I did have a web agency. I did build websites. Mm-hmm. I constantly talk about this book, Don't Make Me Think, Steve Krug. I was a UX guy, right? Every time somebody tells me something I need to do in Bitcoin, and I think that's bad UX in terms of consumer end market, I refuse to do it. So when somebody says, oh, can you open a channel to me? And they explain it, I was like, I'm just not going to do this. Too complicated. I can't go to my dad and say, Dad, I've got the future of money here. You need to set up a Lightning node and open a channel. He's going, what the fuck? And so I refuse to do it. And I've never done it.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I'm going to get bullshit for this, but it's truth.
That's on us. Like, I do think that.
No, it's not on you. I think eventually it gets solved so I don't have to. I know eventually.
That's what I mean. Like, the pieces need to be filled in for Lightning to be for non-custodial Lightning.
Yeah.
To be a far more seamless process. I think that's kind of happening. Like, folks are working on an LSP spec. So being able to do non-custodial Lightning like Phoenix does, I think really well. I think gold standard. They're working on specifying that out so that people can like have that work for mobile phones and have people being able to switch between different providers, which is important. So if Phoenix blows up, you can go somewhere else. But it's all just work. And it's very few people doing a very large amount of work. And it takes time.
Is there internal angst and frustration within the Lightning devs?
I mean, I think that there's internal angst and frustration in all open source communities, right?
Okay.
I always think it's important to think, like, in this kind of work, is this a Bitcoin problem or is this an everyone problem? And things taking long in open source is an everyone problem. It's just the nature of how it works.
I got my companies wrong. It's Voltage that do it, not Amboss. I think they do.
Yeah, they do like managed nodes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think that so Voltage and Greenlight, I believe, are working on that type of thing.
Yeah.
And that is like a really promising way to be able to interact in a self-custodial way, but not have to deal with all of it. But I don't know how far along that is with like, just manage my liquidity.
Right.
I'm genuinely not sure.
I think a lot of people were frustrated with Lightning over the last year or so, not necessarily because of Lightning, but because of the apps as well. Like Moon completely broke essentially for a little while, and it was because it's actually just an on-chain solution. It's not Lightning. So how much does that frustrate you? Like or does that not frustrate you? Do you think that's a fair business model that just got sort of found out in a high fee environment?
It doesn't frustrate me that much. I guess it could have been explained a bit better. I know that we don't want to have to explain these things, but if you're having a Lightning wallet and every payment is a swap, transparency with fees, like that is important.
No end users should know or care.
But maybe if that's the case, then they shouldn't do it, because it meant that loads of people had what they thought was Lightning, and then
I mean that's on I'd say that's on the devs on that one. They've created a poor business model. Like I'm really like quite blunt about this. Bitcoin needs to be very easy to use without security trade-offs. So people should be able to download a wallet and be able to send and receive in a very easy way and not have to think about all these things. We are not going to train billions of people who understand the technical nature of Bitcoin. It's just not going to happen. And so it's on I don't mean it in a bad way. It's on developers and UX people and everyone to figure this out, which I know they are, because like, Bitcoin first came out. It was a command line interface. There was no, GUI to this, and then we got GUI. So like, we are heading towards it. It's obviously tough, and I'm not having a pop. I'm just saying for Bitcoin to achieve its end goal, it has to be very easy. ETFs make Bitcoin easy for boomers. Okay, it's not ideal.
They don't get Bitcoin though.
It doesn't matter. In their head, they get the benefit that they want from Bitcoin, which is 21 million price appreciation. That's what they want.
But they don't get Bitcoin.
It's not the point. The point I'm making is they get what they want, which is price appreciation. They don't want Bitcoin. They want Bitcoin price appreciation. That's what they want. They want to bet on it improving, and ETFs are a UX solution for that. We need lots of good UX solutions for making Bitcoin really easy for people to use. Because at the moment, it's primarily nerds and people inside the industry.
I like agree and disagree. I think that we should work towards Bitcoin being very easy to use, but I also think that a lot of people don't right now need Bitcoin, right? And it shouldn't be impossible to use, but where people need to use Bitcoin, like as long as it's possible to find a way.
Oh yeah,
I do. This is what grates me about people comparing Lightning and Visa. It's not Visa. It maybe can aspire to be like Visa, but it is a private censorship resistance payment network. Like it's a completely different thing. And the comparison of like, it needs to be so sleek and so fantastic, like that would be great. And that's the ideal to work towards. But the reality is you're offering a different thing.
Of course.
So I wish it was less clunky, but if this is what you need, this is what you need, and you can make it work.
Yeah. By the way, I definitely don't want to sound like a dick and unappreciative. I know how hard people work. It's just, I always go back to don't make me think. Like I always go back to that. Don't make me think. Make it easier. And look, I know you have to think a little bit with Bitcoin, but when things fail, it's a bit like, and you don't know why they fail, and you're like, huh?
Yeah. That's rough.
But that's not me. That's not appreciating you. I feel like we should make that first therapy donation. Being a dick. I think we should go and get a drink.
Yeah, let's do it.
Is there anything we didn't talk about that you'd like to have talked about?
You should shill Btrust a bit.
Oh yeah, your buddy Jay-Z.
You're best friends with Jay-Z.
Yeah, and you should. Have you rapped with him?
Have I rapped with him?
Yeah.
You can answer that question yourself. Btrust. So Btrust is a nonprofit focused on decentralizing development of Bitcoin. So it's a little bit different to the other ones. Like most people are just focused on finding people and giving them grants. We specifically want to find people from outside of the usual places. So focus on Global South, right now work in Africa. And we are starting a program in January, very similar to Chaincode's program, getting people introduced to Bitcoin open source and hopefully giving them grants on the other side of it. It's nice. Like I always felt like I made it here by complete accident. Like I come from the bottom of Africa and no one knew who I was. And I applied for this Chaincode thing and I thought I would never get it. And it's been really amazing to see, like you put the call out and people surface themselves. Like they do, we put the call out and like this college kid from Nigeria is contributing to Bitcoin Core now. Like, and he's doing great work. He's like fixing the fee estimator, making it better. And he just put his hand up and did the work and here he is. And that's like kind of a magical thing to be a part of. Having gone through Chaincode, had someone like really go out to bat for me, it's really nice to be able to go out to bat for other people.
I love that. Brilliant. Yeah. Well, listen, look, we love you. We think you're brilliant. You should do more of this. You definitely should. No, you should. You should. And maybe you just do it here every few months with us, every 6 months. Perfect. But you are brilliant. We appreciate everything you do. We loved our time in the Vibe Car in South.
The Vibe Car.
South Africa is where you're from, in Kenya. It was amazing. Yeah. But I think it's Friday night. Yeah. We've done 9 interviews in 3 days.
It's Saturday night. That's how tired.
Is it Saturday night? It's Saturday night. We don't know what the hell's going on. Let's go and get a drink.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Danny.